We have Rose Adams from the class of 1970. We have Veronica Bierman Rogers from the class of 1974. Judy Walsh Smith from the class of 1960. And we have Mary Osterman Winkle. She is a former teacher at McHenry High School and a coach, and she was here from 1968 to 2002. And then Dorothy Drakeford Vick is a former teacher and GAA advisor, and you'll learn about what GAA is today. She was here in 1955 to 1958. So let's all give them a round of applause and welcome them back. Just a reminder before we begin, please turn off your cell phones and place them in your bag so we can give our full attention to these wonderful people that have come to share their stories with us.
Okay, and then we're going to begin by the video about Title IX and what it is at McHenry High School. This video is available to everybody on our Instagram page at Activism Club.
In 1972, Congress passed Title IX, the landmark federal civil rights law that prohibits sex discrimination in education.
It reads, "No person in the United States shall, on the basis of sex, be excluded from participation in, be denied the benefits of, or be subjected to discrimination under any education program or activity receiving federal financial assistance."
Thanks to Title IX, women could no longer be left out.
Here at McHenry High School, we have been making strides in advancements since the school opened in 1925.
Over the years, when opportunities weren't available to women, we found ways to make it happen.
When sports were not available, we grew the Girls Athletic Association to one of the largest clubs on campus.
We formed intramural and interscholastic teams to show that girls can play.
With little to no budget, we did the best with what we had.
All we asked for was the chance to compete.
All we needed was a chance to prove ourselves.
We knew what to do from there.
Title IX changed everything.
Slowly and steadily, progress came.
Doors were open.
Varsity programs were created and supported.
Opportunities were available that had never been available before.
In the 50 years since Title IX, the women of McHenry have shown just what they can do.
We have taken leadership roles in many of our programs.
We have advanced our education, especially in STEM programs.
We not only participated in sports, but excelled, with many moving on to the collegiate level.
Today, we are 15 teams, hundreds of student athletes, and thousands of alumni athletes.
The women of McHenry proved year after year they were unstoppable.
After all we have accomplished,
all the trophies and triumphs,
we are just getting started.
Where do we go from here?
Just watch, you'll see.
Okay, so we're going to have Dorothy, do you want to start?
Yes.
And do you want to use the microphone or are you good?
Can you hear me? Yeah. I'll use the mic if you want me to. If you can hear me, I'll love to not use it. I taught in the last half of the 1950s, so you can kind of figure out if you do the math where I am on the age scale. When I came to McHenry to teach, there were two gyms. There was only the East Campus building. The women's gym was down below ground level, and it was absolutely not any place near 100 feet long, nor as wide as it should be. The out of bounds area was about this far from the wall. So the facility that all the girls' physical education activities occurred in was a definitely inferior utility to the boys' large gym with two full-size courts and space beyond that for other things that you could be doing at the same time the floor was being used. But that's the way things were. The things were so unbelievably unequal, and I call a lot of it based upon respect and lack of respect. Women were not equal. Their expectations of, from others were not what the boys' expectations were. And the opportunities were not there. So in physical education classes, sometimes large classes and very, very limited space. So you did the best you could. On East Campus, the area closest to the road that goes east down toward the golf course was a large full-size field. North of that was a much smaller field. That was the girls' field for athletics. In the part of the equality, an example was, besides using that little field for classes, that was a disadvantage, but for GAA it was a huge disadvantage. Not quite 50% of the student population being girls came out for GAA, but a very, very large number did. So we had many teams for GAA. If we had 60 students out on that particular day, and you could have 22 on the field for hockey or soccer, you could have 16 for volleyball, but there were all those others and there wasn't the space for them. And any extra space was dedicated to boys. The coaches, they were the kings, and I guess the male students would have been the princes, and the girls were the scullery maids, or what was left over in both activities and equipment. And of course time was important because there were so many of the girls out for GAA and the space was so limited. So it was held on more than one day. If there were 8 volleyball teams signed up, it was voluntary, and you signed up and the girls picked their own teams, and you would have that team throughout maybe a round robin tournament. So 8 teams would all play one another. So that would be 7 games that they would have, and by distributing the days and times, they all got to do something, but not as frequently as the boys did. The Girls Athletic Association would have badminton, and they would have archery, and they would have softball, basketball, soccer, hockey, and a lot of the sports. And at that time there were tennis courts on the south end of East Campus, but when an addition went in, those courts were torn up and the addition was put on top of that. So that was another less thing that we could have overflow space in. When we're through with this discussion, if there's enough time, you can ask more about trying to understand what GAA was. But we're talking today about the athletics a lot, but it was so important because it was more than athletics. It addressed equality, which boils down to learning to have respect for groups that you didn't before, and the respect began to grow for females as they were able to show that they had the ability, the capacity, the strength, the determination to play in sports the same as the males did. But it was so much more than just sports. As the society began to realize that girls could do things too, and not just take care of families, be secretaries, work on the line in factories. They had brains. They could be science. They could experiment and figure out great things in medicine. They could be the CEO of companies. That probably didn't happen as soon as Title IX came, but over time it has happened, and it continues to grow. Women are doing things couldn't even have been dreamed of earlier. But Title IX started that, and as people began to appreciate what was going on, more respect and more understanding of the abilities of women was being accepted. And each step was the foundation for another step, which was just great. To show you as an example of what happened in favoritism when it came to boys and girls in GAA. I told you about the two fields over on East Campus, the outdoor playing fields, and the women's was much smaller. So we did just what we always did. We used what we had and we played. So the girls were out there playing soccer or hockey or whatever after school, and the boys were over on the bigger field practicing for football. And the coaches were complaining to the administration. They didn't like the fact that all those girls were out there and their boys were watching those girls instead of doing all the drills that they wanted to do. The boys were not as attentive because of the presence of girls. So the coaches decided they really needed that extra field. And they approached the administration with the fact that that was needed. They were going to have their kickers over there. So the football kicker had that entire girls' field to practice his kick, which was, patently ridiculous to kick 30, 40 girls out of an activity after school because the coach didn't want his boys looking at the girls. But that was what happened. So things like that may sound ridiculous now, and they couldn't happen now, and parents would get on the horn and be screaming about that fact. Didn't matter. That just wasn't the expectation, not only of the school and that program, it wasn't the expectation of society. That isn't the way things work. So when you're thinking about Title IX, think about equality. And that began some of the equality that we have now. Of course, the United States is far from being equal. We still have a long way to go in many respects. None of them as important perhaps as sports, but we're better than we used to be, and we're getting better all the time. I told the group before that recently I saw a TV interview of a basketball star, a woman professional basketball star, very tall and absolutely gorgeous, and she was retiring. And the person interviewing her was asking her about the obstacles that she had experienced because of the emphasis on men's sports and not women's, and how hard it was to get a footing, and had that affected her in her salaries, etc. She says, I'm easily a millionaire now from playing professional sports, but she didn't do it in the United States. she had to base her career in Europe to get that kind of money. It's coming though now for women. But again, respect of women. Hopefully it spreads over to respect of everyone, but that's the main thing that has happened to women, equality and respect. And ask me later about GAA if we have question times. Oh.
Hi, I'm Judy, and I was in the class of 1960. Yeah, things have really changed. You guys don't realize how fortunate you are. I mean, we had a wonderful time in school. We played a lot of sports, and like the old high school, and you talk about like the girls' gym. I mean, they never really took care of it that well. Growing up, like the grade school kids from St. Mary's and St. Pat's, I attended St. Pat's, they would come on Saturdays and play, and that was a big thing. So I mean, this gym was so well used. And but like in high school, it's true, we were so limited. We had GAA, and I was a student leader, which was really fun. And once a year we could play in the boys' gym for an all-star, where the all-star game, where the boys, they had everything. And it was really, we have come a long way. Like home ec, it was hilarious. No one could ever cook the way that, like in the day, I mean, how they taught us to cook, and it was really very unfortunate, where the boys could have, you know, trades classes, and they could try things. How wonderful to see if they, you know, did they want to be a carpenter? Did they want to be a mechanic? We didn't. The girls had none of that. I mean, everything was kind of frowned upon. And I remember one evening they were going to have a career night at the high school, and I said, I know a lot of people. I can ask different people in the trades to come and speak. And they said, in the trades? Why? We would want that. I mean, what good is that? People should go to college or just get out and work. And my daughter is a counselor at Grant, and it's funny how things have changed. She encourages people, if they can, go to Lake County or MCC, and to save yourself a lot of money and to go and to get in the, you know, if you're not interested in college, kids think about the trades. She recently ran into a fellow that he wasn't the sharpest deck in the cards, you might say. He is making so much money right now. He is a welder. He welds the oil drills underwater. I mean, she said this guy, you just wouldn't believe the money he's made, and you know, he really likes it. There are so many opportunities out there that, you know, that we didn't have, and I thank heavens, like we had GAA. It was just wonderful that we could participate in the sports. And Dorothy was my teacher, and she just was the best. She treated everybody so equal. I mean, she didn't care who you were or what your parents did or anything. She liked you as a person, and people could go to her. They had an issue and they could talk to her, where a lot of teachers, they were none, that they weren't with us, you know, where she was with the kids, and she understood, and she gave us a lot of opportunities. But you guys have so much, you know, that you can do anything you want to do. And, you know, just try the different sports, try different things. And that was so nice, like now with school, take the opportunity. If there's some extra classes you want to take, maybe that's going to be your career, and maybe it's not. But it's going to save you and your parents a ton of money. And you have a wonderful future, and the best of luck to you.
I was in the class of 1970, so I was one of the first two classes to attend West. And things were a lot different then. I mean, hoodies weren't a thing, and you couldn't wear jeans. In fact, I think it was my junior or senior year, the dress code changed, and you finally didn't have to wear a skirt or a dress if you were a girl. So that was kind of a very obvious change. But also, if you got pregnant, you were out of school, you had to finish remotely if you were going to finish, and not like you have remote education today, you were kind of on your own. The expectations for girls, as has been mentioned, were far different in terms of what your future prospects would be like, especially if you were talking about a career. You were rather limited. But I was on the cusp of Title IX. I never had the opportunity to participate in girls' sports in the interscholastic arena. That came a few years later, as one of our two of our other speakers will talk about. But you know, it was the opportunities that you did have available. The Girls Athletic Association, you took advantage of every one of those because it was so important to you. In many respects, the activities were like kind of a glorified continuation of PE class. You still wore your PE uniforms to participate. It was all after school. No boys were allowed at any of your games. We had no coaches. Student leaders basically did a lot of the officiating. I remember playing basketball games when the clock never stopped, even for free throws. I mean, you kept playing and playing. We played an abbreviated half-court game that I'm sure you'll hear more about. So it was very difficult to score many points, for instance, because you didn't have that sense of momentum in your play. So the level of competition was important, but what wasn't what is emphasized today that you see in team sports. And GAA really was an activity. It was something in which you participated, you got points for, and maybe you got some kind of recognition through a pin if your team won the All-Star game or whatever. We had no trophies, nothing like that. And we did have the All-Star game, which was once a year. It was usually classes pitted against classes to play. And your parents could come. Boys still weren't allowed, even through my senior year. I think some of my classmates came in drag to try to get in. I don't know if they did or not. But, you know, so it was a very, very different time that we had. And Title IX really wasn't designed to be focused on sports. It was designed to address a much broader aspect of non-discrimination on the basis of sex. But because the word activity is in that legislation, those 37 words that changed the world, Title IX, because that word was in there, sports and other kinds of activities and programs in school settings were covered. So sports tends to be some of the most visible aspects that we see, because now we have pro sports. You have a level of NCAA women's sports that you never saw when we were around. In fact, I think the first national women's basketball tournament was in 1974. Actually, it was held at Illinois State, if I'm not mistaken. One of the players there was a woman named Pat Head, who later became Pat Summitt. Some of you may recognize that name. But the winners that year were the Immaculate Conception Mighty Macs. And if I'm not mistaken, they had to wire back home to get money to take a bus ride back to Pennsylvania after winning a national championship. So you can see how far women's sports have come in the past 50 years. And you may wonder about the relevance of, well, you know, who cares? This is here where, you know, our rights are protected, everything's okay. And it may seem strange talking about a law that's now 50 years old, because looking back at it, it would be like my class of 70 looking back 52 years now, 1918, and talking about laws that were in effect then. But I want to raise that timeline for you in one critical aspect. At the turn of the 20th century, in the late 1890s, early 1900s, many schools around the country did have interscholastic sports competition for girls. colleges did for women. Many around the country did. But at the turn of the 20th century, in the early, around 1907 and 1927, the Illinois High School Association, along with other kinds of associations around the country, banned girls' interscholastic competition. So it was something that girls had, young women had before, that they no longer had. Because the threat was that if your school participated in interscholastic activities in sports for girls, that the high school association would sanction you and your boys' teams could compete within their conferences. So it wasn't until this law passed in 1972 that all started to change. And so you need to have that perspective to understand that just because a law is in place, just because you have rights today, doesn't mean that you may always have those. You need to keep questioning, you need to keep moving forward and making progress in terms of respect and non-discrimination for all people, and not take for granted those things that you have today. You have so many opportunities today. I'll say one more thing before passing on the mic. When I was in high school, we did not have that opportunity. I never got to wear a Warrior uniform to represent McHenry High School, as much as I love sports. The next generation, my niece, had a full basketball scholarship to the University of West Florida, still holds the 3-point records there. Her daughter now is a high school volleyball player. Excellent player, but is wondering whether she should focus all of her attention on playing her senior year in high school, because she didn't know if she'd be good enough to play at a D1 level where she wants to go for college. And so should she invest in doing that or not? You can see the sea change that's occurred over time. But if we don't keep maintaining those rights, if we don't keep moving forward to meet that pay equity, to make opportunities continually more available to girls and young women, you may very well stand to lose some ground in that battle for civil rights.
My name is Mary Osterman-Winkle, and I'll give you my best PE voice. I taught physical education and coached at McHenry High School from 1968 to 2002 when I retired. A number of people that I talk to in my own life, in my own circle, they don't know about Title IX. I ask them about, we talk about girls' sports or activities that are happening. I go, you know anything about Title IX? And they go, what's Title IX? Is that kind of housing, subsidized housing thing? And I go, no, and then we get into what it is about girls' sports. So it's not surprising that a number of you don't know about Title IX, but it's important that, I feel it's important that we're here today to be able to have these kinds of conversations to help us to remember what it was like 50 years ago, 60 years ago, 70 years ago. I mean, some of us go, yeah, I don't care about that, I'm right now in the here and now. But you got here in the here and now because people back there moved things forward to get you here. The things that are socially acceptable in your life today, what your norms are, what your values are, what you say is socially acceptable and what is not socially acceptable, is far different than what it was in our generation. In the 40s and the 50s, it was a patriarchal society where the man was the top dog, he was the breadwinner, and the woman was secondary, and she was the housekeeper, and she raised the family and did PTA meetings and bake sales and what have you, and supported the kids, and then she had dinner on the table when Dad came home from work. It's, Leave It to Beaver kind of thing, if you've ever seen some of those series before. And so it wasn't surprising that in 1960, when I'm a freshman in high school, I get to high school and find out that I'm an athlete, but I can't participate in anything. All I can participate in is GAA. But I didn't know any different. I knew the boys had athletics. They went to other schools and they participated, and they got trophies and awards. They got scholarships, and they had paid coaches and paid referees. We had GAA, but we thought that was the best thing since sliced bread. I mean, it was our opportunity finally to participate in athletics. But it was intramurals. It was girls playing against girls. Boys were never allowed to see the games, God forbid. I don't know why. We reffed our own games. We had student leaders ref our games, or upperclassmen reffed our games. We didn't have any paid coaches. We didn't have any scholarships. We didn't have any busing. We weren't going anywhere. There was no busing to go anywhere. No scholarships. We weren't even thinking about scholarships. But the boys had those. So you can see there was a lot of inequalities between what was available, even in high school, if you were a boy versus you were a girl. Boys, for example, could take shop, they could take metals class, they could take auto mechanics. I wanted to take wood shop. You know, I couldn't do that. I was a female. We were pigeonholed. Males and females were pigeonholed into areas that are socially acceptable for you to participate in and to learn and to grow in. If you were going to go to college and you were a female, your career choices were you could be a secretary, you could not be a CEO, you could be a nurse, you could never be a doctor, you could be an airline stewardess, you could never be a pilot, and so forth. So there was always these secondary roles that women were pigeonholed into. These are the things that you can do and socially acceptable. So those are the things that we did. But as time moved on and then Title IX got passed, it just opened the floodgates for female. I mean, we were biting at the bullet to get out of the barn and go out and play and compete against other schools. It was incredible. It led to not only girls' interscholastic sports, it led to co-ed physical education, it led to girls going to auto shop and boys going to home ec and so forth. So a lot has changed over time, but time and change takes time. And it takes people wanting to be proactive, people to question, why can't I do this? Why am I not allowed to do that? We had those stipulations where there were walls that we could not get through. Those walls have been broken down mostly. There's still stumbling blocks that are there that you have to hurdle over. But you are the people that are carrying on for the next generation to keep asking, why not? Why can't I do this? You have all the possibilities to do whatever you want to do in this world. You can be whoever you want to be, and nothing is going to stop you. Going back a little bit, if you were in college in the 50s and the 60s, and you got out and you were in the business world, and you were a female, and you as a female are just as qualified as the male, 9 times out of 10 they would pick the male, because you as a female, you might get married. If you get married, you're going to have kids, and you're going to have to take time off of work. And that's not good for our company, so we're going to take the man because he's more reliable. There was a lot of inequalities, and Title IX helped to balance a lot of that out, where you could not discriminate just because you were a female. You couldn't discriminate just because you were pregnant. You couldn't discriminate because you had kids at home, and so forth. So you have such opportunities today, and I'm so impressed with I'm jealous. I mean, I wish I was a high school kid. I could do all these things all over again. It's just incredible the opportunities that you have. So take advantage of what opportunities you have. And even if you don't think you're good at something, give it a try, because you never know where that's going to take you on your road to life. It could give you the bifurcation that you might go this direction rather than that direction. You just never know. So just keep on asking questions, keep being proactive, and keep trying to make changes happen in this world, because they happen because you make them happen. So, thank you.
Hi, I'm Ronnie Bierman Rogers. I graduated from this building in 1974, class of 74. I'm just going to give you a little bit about my experience with Title IX, because it came into effect when I was a junior in high school. Before that, as a freshman and sophomore, we had GAA, which is the Girls Athletic Association. That offered several different sports. You went and you had fun, you played with your friends, but you were able to play sports. When Title IX was passed in June of 1972, we didn't even know what Title IX was. We came to school that year and they go, hey, you guys get to play sports. So we're like, great, we'll play whatever, we'll play sports then. So we weren't really told or informed about exactly what Title IX was or what was going on with it. We were just concerned that we could play sports. So that first year, when I was a junior, between junior and seniors, there were probably maybe 10 girls who went out. The rest of our teams were freshman and sophomore teams. So if you can imagine now that group of people getting together based on how you have sports now, it's quite a difference in how your sport is played, because of course you've got freshmen and sophomores coming in who, some of them may have never ever played a sport. We played sports because they were available to us. We played sports we had never played in interscholastic that first year. And because the schedules were so limited, we might get 6 games for our whole schedule. That was our schedule. We could play almost every sport. So I played field hockey, I played badminton, I played basketball, I played softball, I played volleyball. We did track because you could go from softball right into track. So we took advantage of playing all those sports that first year. And none of that would have been available with, of course, Title IX, but also because coaches and teachers like Sis Warner, who started the interscholastic program, and Mary Winkle here, who was part of that too with coaching. The opportunity we never realized at the time because no one told us about it. We didn't know what was going on. So now I want to personally thank all of these ladies who have been part of that and informing you today of exactly what Title IX was, because back there we were ignorant. We were like 16, 17-year-olds coming in and we're like, and maybe none of you have heard about Title IX before today even, but it's just to inform you that now we have all these opportunities, not only in sports, but in, whatever you're into, whatever you're going to do in life. It doesn't have to be sports, it can be a job, it can be whatever, to at least go out and try it or get involved in some way. You don't have to be good at it in order to help that progression of it.
Alrighty, so that concludes our panel for today. Thank you, Rose, Ronnie, Judy, and Mary, and Dorothy for sharing your stories, and thank you all for taking your time today and learning about Title IX. As you leave today, think about the stories that you've heard today. Every person in this room has more opportunities available to them because of this. Because of the women in our panel and women all over. So talk with your family members that went to school before 1972 and ask them about what their school experience was. Thank you very much.
Can we get a round of applause? We have about 2 minutes left. Did anyone have a question for anyone on our panel? Something Mary shared with us in the beginning session. Do you want to explain what the medical community thought of and why women couldn't go full court or exert themselves?
In high school and in college, and even when I came to McHenry High School in '68, we're playing basketball, girls basketball, and you had 6 players, stationary guards, stationary forwards, and 2 centers. But as a player, you could only take 3 dribbles, and you had to stop and pass the ball, and you had to pass it 2 times before the ball could be shot at the basket. And you had a limited dribble. You kicked 3 dribbles, and you had to stop, and you had to pass the ball. And the reason was the medical profession was not too sure at the time. This is the 70s. Can women actually do the endurance of going down the basketball court, going up and down, and actually do the cardiovascular that's necessary? And they weren't too sure what the impact that would have on future reproductive rights and what have you. So it was just crazy thinking that women can't run down a basketball court and play full court and still be functioning human beings and have babies.
Yeah, and on Saturday mornings, Buckner Gym would be open, and I'd come and play, I'd scrimmage with the boys' team, play full court and everything, and then have to go back to the half-court 3 dribble mess. It was awful.
It was terrible.
And Judy, do you want to show us your 1960 GAA sweater?
Oh, yes.
Do they still have school sweaters? Probably not.
GAA sweater.
Yes, this